In the early 1700s, a Scottish sailor would experience a life no man should endure, complete isolation on a deserted island for over 4 years. His name was Alexander Selkirk. Today we delve into the story of the man who became the real Robinson Crusoe, a tale of survival, despair, and the unbreakable human spirit. Viewer discretion is advised. This story contains elements of extreme isolation, psychological strain, and life-threatening survival conditions. Alexander Selkirk was born in 1676 in the small coastal village of Lower Largo, Scotland. The rugged cliffs and crashing North Sea waves shaped his early years. He grew up with a sense of adventure, tempered by a rebellious streak that often put him at odds with local authorities and his family. Selkirk's youth was marked by daring escapes and reckless decisions. While most boys learned trades or studied at school, Alexander was drawn to the sea. Tales of pirates, traders, and explorers filled his imagination, and he dreamed of leaving his village for the world beyond the horizon. By his late teens, he had already attracted trouble. He got into fights, defied authority, and narrowly avoided imprisonment for minor offenses. His father's attempts to discipline him failed. Alexander craved freedom above all else. By the age of 20, Alexander Selkirk had had enough of the limitations of village life. He joined the privateer ships operating along the Spanish Main, vessels authorized by the government to attack enemy ships. Privateering was a dangerous life. Sailors faced disease, starvation, mutiny, and death, but to Selkirk it was freedom. Privateer ships were a chaotic blend of sailors, adventurers, and criminals. Discipline was harsh, food was scarce, and the threat of combat was constant. Yet Selkirk thrived in this environment. He was fearless, clever, and determined, qualities that would later save his life. In 1704, Selkirk joined the Cinque Ports, a privateer ship captained by Thomas Stradling. The ship's mission was daring: intercept Spanish vessels in the Pacific and seize their treasures. But life aboard the Cinque Ports was far from glamorous. The ship was old and leaking, its timbers creaking under the stress of the waves. Supplies ran low quickly, and the crew's morale was fragile. Arguments with the captain were frequent, as Stradling demanded obedience while ignoring the growing risks of the voyage. Selkirk quickly realized the vessel was unseaworthy. He voiced his concerns, warning the captain that the ship would not survive the journey. His warnings were dismissed. The other sailors, wary of mutiny and fearful of the captain, sided with Stradling, leaving Selkirk increasingly isolated. The tension came to a head when the Cinque Ports anchored near the uninhabited Juan Fernández Islands, far off the coast of Chile. Selkirk saw the rocky cliffs and the potential safety they offered. He made a life-altering decision: he would stay behind. Selkirk requested to be left on the island, believing that continuing the voyage on the leaking ship was a death sentence. Captain Stradling reluctantly agreed, though some accounts suggest the decision was fueled by Selkirk's insistence and the crew's frustration with him. With only a musket, gunpowder, a knife, a hatchet, a Bible, some bedding, and his clothing, Alexander Selkirk stepped onto the island. He watched the ship disappear over the horizon, carrying men who might never return for him. The first days were brutal. The island, untouched by humans, offered no easy food or shelter. Selkirk faced fear like he had never known. The silence of solitude, the roar of waves crashing against cliffs, and the knowledge that no one would come to help him if he fell. He scavenged the coastline for anything edible, fought off swarms of rats that infested his bedding, and struggled to light fires with damp wood. The nights were long, cold, and terrifying. Selkirk later recounted that he often felt the crushing weight of despair and considered abandoning all hope of survival. The first weeks on Juan Fernández Island were brutal. Selkirk quickly realized that survival required more than courage. It demanded ingenuity, patience, and a willingness to endure pain. The island was teeming with goats, but catching them was a dangerous task. Their sharp hooves and agility over rocky cliffs made hunting a skill as much as a gamble. Selkirk scavenged for food along the shoreline: shellfish, small crabs, and any edible vegetation he could find. Water was scarce in certain parts of the island, forcing him to follow the streams and collect rainwater. Each day was a test of both body and mind, a constant battle to stay alive. Without shelter, Selkirk was vulnerable to the elements. He constructed 2 huts, one for sleeping, another for cooking. Using branches, leaves, and grass, He learned to make structures sturdy enough to withstand heavy rain and high winds. His first attempts were crude, collapsing in storms, but persistence taught him the art of survival construction. He lined the floors with leaves and seaweed to insulate against the damp and cold. Over time, the huts became more sophisticated, with walls thick enough to keep out the wind and smoke from fires venting through improvised chimneys. Each improvement was a small victory, a testament to human adaptability. One of the unexpected dangers of the island was its rodent population. Rats swarmed Selkirk's bedding at night, threatening his meager supplies and sanity. In response, he tamed several feral cats, teaching them to hunt the rats and act as protectors. The cats became not just survival partners, but companions. Their presence offered small moments of comfort amidst profound isolation. Even these tiny bonds with living creatures reminded Selkirk that he was still part of the natural world, not entirely forgotten. Hunting goats was Selkirk's first real test of skill and patience. At first he failed repeatedly, narrowly avoiding falls and injuries. But gradually he learned the patterns of the herds, the best times to approach, and how to use his musket effectively. Each successful hunt was life-affirming, meat for nourishment, skins for clothing, and a growing confidence in his ability to survive. Selkirk roasted goat over open fires, experimented with boiling water from freshwater streams, and learned to preserve food for days. The rituals of preparation and cooking became essential, providing structure to days that might otherwise have blended into endless monotony. With clothes wearing thin from constant use and exposure to the elements, Selkirk turned to the goats he hunted. He carefully skinned them and fashioned rudimentary clothing, trousers, jackets, and even shoes, using sinew and rawhide to bind pieces together. The transformation was striking. From a man of civilization, he became one with the island, rugged, strong, and entirely dependent on his environment. His appearance, now wild and unfamiliar, would astonish anyone who later saw him rescued. Time on the island was marked not by hours or weeks, but by tasks, gathering food, maintaining shelters, and surviving storms. The isolation pressed on Selkirk's mind as relentlessly as the elements pressed on his body. He spoke to himself constantly, reciting Bible passages aloud and sang hymns to stave off madness. Sleep was often interrupted by strange noises, the calls of birds, the rustle of animals, and the pounding of waves against cliffs. Over time, he became hyper-aware of every sound, every shadow. A man attuned entirely to his environment out of necessity. Storms were relentless, battering the island with wind and rain. Selkirk's shelters were tested, and he narrowly escaped death more than once. Rocks shifted underfoot, and once, while chasing a goat along a cliff, he fell and injured himself severely. Alone, with no one to help, he was forced to nurse his wounds with limited tools and ingenuity. In those moments, Selkirk realized the fragility of life and the razor-thin margin between survival and tragedy. Each day demanded vigilance, courage, and unyielding determination. Isolation took its toll on Selkirk's mind. He described talking to himself as if others were present, rehearsing conversations and giving speeches aloud. His Bible became his constant companion, a guide, a confidant, and a source of solace. Singing and prayer helped him mark time, giving structure to days that might otherwise have been swallowed by despair. Despite the challenges, Selkirk's mind adapted. Solitude taught him patience, observation, and reflection. He began to anticipate storms, understand goat behavior, and even predict tides, skills that would keep him alive for years. As months turned into years, Selkirk's understanding of the island deepened. Every rock, tree, and cave became familiar. He mapped the terrain in his mind, learning where goats grazed, which streams held fresh water, and which spots offered shelter from storms. The island was no longer an unknown enemy, it was a home he had earned through struggle and observation. Selkirk's confidence grew alongside his survival skills. He could travel barefoot across jagged cliffs without hesitation, knowing which footholds were safe. He built traps for goats, using vines and sharpened sticks, and discovered edible plants that sustained him when hunting was unsuccessful. By his second year, Selkirk had become a master hunter. He could track goats silently, predict their movements, and strike with precision. Fishing became equally important. He crafted hooks from bones, nets from woven plant fibers, and patiently waited along tide pools and river mouths. Each successful hunt and catch not only nourished him but reinforced his control over the environment. He also began experimenting with preservation techniques. Smoking meat over slow fires, drying fish in the sun, and storing water in hollowed-out gourds allowed him to survive stretches when resources were scarce. These practices turned survival into a disciplined routine, and the island's harshness became a structured challenge rather than a threat. Selkirk's relationship with animals went beyond hunting. The feral cats he had initially tamed became allies, keeping rats at bay. He observed bird behavior, noting nesting areas and flight patterns. He learned to avoid aggressive creatures while protecting those that could help him. The island, once a place of fear, became an ecosystem in which he could navigate safely. These connections, small as they were, provided companionship. Even the briefest interactions with living creatures eased the psychological burden of total isolation, reminding Selkirk that life could persist even in solitude. The psychological challenge of isolation remained relentless. Selkirk developed rituals to maintain his sanity, reciting Bible passages aloud, singing hymns, and keeping track of days and seasons through the sun and stars. He even assigned roles to his cats, talking to them as if they were human companions, creating a semblance of social structure in his solitary existence. Despite these measures, moments of despair were inevitable. Selkirk wrote in letters that were never sent, imagined conversations with people from his past, and sometimes questioned whether he had been abandoned forever. Yet the daily discipline of survival became a lifeline, anchoring him against the creeping tide of loneliness. Storms continued to test Selkirk's resilience. Fierce winds tore at his shelters, torrential rain filled his huts with water, and occasional landslides threatened to crush his meager possessions. He became adept at predicting weather patterns by observing clouds, wind, and ocean currents. Each storm was both a threat and an opportunity to refine his skills and reinforce his shelters. Selkirk also adapted his clothing for weather changes. Goatskin garments were layered during cold months and adjusted during hotter periods. The fire, central to warmth and cooking, became a sacred tool. Selkirk knew its life-giving power and guarded it carefully. With each passing year, Selkirk began to see the island not as a prison but as a teacher. It taught him patience, observation, and the consequences of every choice. Missteps led to hunger, injury, or illness. Successes brought nourishment and safety. This feedback loop honed his instincts, and instincts became intuition, allowing him to live almost symbiotically with the land and sea. He observed tides and weather, predicted animal behavior, and even memorized landmarks for navigation across the cliffs and beaches. Survival was no longer just a struggle. It was a mastery of his environment. By the third year, Selkirk had transformed both physically and mentally. His skin was tanned and weathered, muscles hardened by daily labor. His hair and beard had grown long and unkempt, giving him the appearance of a man reclaimed by nature. Yet his mind was sharper than ever, a combination of instinct, observation, and disciplined thought guiding every action. He moved silently through the island, almost invisible to wildlife, hunting with precision and gathering resources efficiently. Selkirk had become a man fully adapted to isolation, self-sufficient, resilient, and cautious. The solitude that once threatened his sanity now fostered clarity and survival intelligence. Selkirk refined his food sources. He diversified his diet, combining goat meat, fish, shellfish, and edible plants. He stored water in hollowed-out bamboo and collected rainwater. Traps and snares supplemented his hunting, ensuring a more consistent food supply. Every skill he acquired over the years became part of a survival system that kept him alive, where lesser men would have perished. Even fire-making became a ritualized practice. He learned to light fires in wet conditions using flint and tinder, a skill that required both patience and dexterity. His mastery of fire, food, and shelter created a stable existence amidst the chaos of the island. Despite his mastery of the physical world, Selkirk faced moments of intense psychological strain. Years of solitude weighed on him. He reflected on his life choices, imagining family and friends far away, and sometimes feared that he would die alone, forgotten by the world. Yet he survived, not only through skill but through sheer determination to live, to endure, and to reclaim his connection to life. These reflections deepened his understanding of human resilience. Solitude had stripped him of comfort, society, and companionship, but it also forged a clarity of mind and a discipline that few would ever know. By the 4th year, Selkirk's routines were perfected. He could hunt, fish, and gather food with efficiency, maintain his shelters against the harshest storms, and predict changes in the weather. The island, once an enemy, had become his domain, a place he understood intimately, where he moved with confidence and purpose. Yet even mastery could not erase the loneliness. The quiet weighed heavily. Every bird call, every rustle of leaves reminded him of the absence of human contact. He spoke to himself daily, recounting imaginary conversations, rehearsing debates, and reading aloud from his Bible, which remained a lifeline for his sanity. On several occasions, Selkirk spotted ships on the horizon. His heart would race with hope, only to falter when the vessels turned away or proved to be Spanish warships, enemies who would have captured or killed him. These near encounters were a cruel reminder that the world beyond the island still existed but remained inaccessible. Selkirk became skilled at hiding from these ships. He would retreat into cliffs or dense brush, holding his breath for hours until danger passed. The fear of capture was constant, and it shaped his movements, teaching him stealth and patience in ways that survival on the island alone could not. The island continued to test Selkirk with storms that could last days. Torrential rain filled his shelters, strong winds knocked down trees, and landslides sometimes threatened to bury his food stores. Each storm required him to rebuild, repair, and adapt. Scarcity of food was always a concern. Some months the goats were scarce, fish were difficult to catch, and wild plants were insufficient. He learned to ration supplies meticulously. Every ounce of meat, every drop of water, every bit of firewood was accounted for. Waste could mean death. Through careful planning and ingenuity, he survived these months of scarcity, lessons that would later define his legendary endurance. Years of isolation had transformed Selkirk's body as well as his mind. He had become muscular, lean, and weathered, a man forged by hardship. His hair and beard grew long and wild, blending into the rugged island landscape. Goatskin clothing, patched and layered, protected him from wind and cold, and his bare feet were hardened to navigate jagged rocks and cliff faces. The appearance of this castaway astonished those who would later see him rescued. He looked less like a man of society and more like a creature of the wild, a testament to the raw power of survival and adaptation. Despite his mastery, Selkirk still faced moments of despair. He imagined his family, friends, and homeland, wondering if he would ever see them again. He sometimes considered that his life might end alone, unremembered. These thoughts were tempered by action. Hunting, building, and surviving gave him purpose and a reason to continue. He developed elaborate routines to maintain mental stability. Each day included physical labor, food preparation, and spiritual reflection. Even in isolation, he built a rhythm that allowed him to endure, showing that the human mind can adapt to extreme loneliness with creativity and discipline. In February 1709, after 4 years and 4 months, Alexander Selkirk's ordeal finally ended. The English privateer ship Duke, commanded by Captain Woodes Rogers, anchored near the island. They had been surveying for potential targets when they spotted movement on the cliffs. The sight of a man, wild and ragged, signaling them was astonishing. Selkirk's appearance shocked the crew. Long hair and beard, goatskin clothing, and a body hardened by years of labor. Yet the moment was one of relief and joy. Selkirk wept as he finally saw other humans, a tearful reunion with civilization 4 years after stepping onto the island alone. Returning to life among humans was not immediate. Selkirk had been shaped by solitude and nature, and civilization now seemed foreign. He struggled with the noise, routines, and social interactions that once came naturally. Yet his survival story fascinated the crew, who listened in awe as he recounted his experiences. He became a legend almost immediately. His tale spread among sailors and writers, capturing the imagination of those who heard it. 4 years of solitude had turned Selkirk into a living symbol of human resilience and ingenuity. After rescue, Selkirk returned to England and eventually Scotland. His story inspired fascination and became widely known, catching the attention of writers, including Daniel Defoe. Selkirk's experiences formed the basis for the iconic novel Robinson Crusoe, bringing his survival tale to generations of readers. He resumed life at sea briefly, but the island had left its mark. Selkirk was forever changed, physically, mentally, and spiritually, a man who had confronted isolation and emerged alive, stronger, and wiser. After his rescue in 1709, Alexander Selkirk returned to his homeland in Scotland, stepping once more onto familiar soil that now seemed alien to him. 4 years of solitude had transformed him physically, mentally, and emotionally. Though the cliffs and waves of Juan Fernández Island were behind him, the lessons he learned remained etched into every movement and thought. Selkirk's family was astonished by his transformation. His hair and beard had grown wild, his skin tanned and weathered, and his muscles hardened from relentless labor. Yet beneath the rugged exterior was a man of remarkable resilience, a living testament to survival against all odds. News of Selkirk's survival spread quickly. Sailors, writers, and curious citizens flocked to hear the story of the man who had lived alone for over 4 years. His experiences became a source of fascination, and tales of his ingenuity, endurance, and courage inspired others to imagine the boundaries of human resilience. Selkirk's detailed accounts of hunting, shelter building, and self-sufficiency captivated audiences. He spoke of storms, wild goats, feral cats, and the terrifying isolation that had tested him in ways no one else could understand. These stories were both cautionary and inspirational, illustrating the fine line between life and death in the natural world. Selkirk's tale would reach the ears of Daniel Defoe, who drew inspiration from the sailor's ordeal for one of the most famous novels in literary history, Robinson Crusoe. While Defoe's work added fictional elements, the core of the story, a man marooned on an island, forced to survive using ingenuity and determination, was drawn from Selkirk's real-life experiences. The novel immortalized Selkirk's struggles, bringing the idea of endurance, isolation, and human adaptability to readers worldwide. Though the name Selkirk would not appear in the book, his life became a blueprint for resilience and courage in literature. After his extraordinary adventure, Selkirk returned to the sea for a time, but eventually settled into quieter years. The experience of isolation had changed him, instilling a sense of discipline, patience, and self-reliance that stayed with him for life. He often reflected on his time on the island, recognizing both the terror and the triumph of his survival. Selkirk's life serves as a reminder of the human spirit's capacity to endure unimaginable challenges. His ordeal was not an adventure in the traditional sense. It was a relentless struggle against nature, hunger, and loneliness, one that demanded courage and ingenuity every single day. Alexander Selkirk's story is more than a historical curiosity. It teaches us about adaptability, perseverance, and the power of human resilience. When stripped of society, comfort, and companionship, he learned to rely on instinct, intellect, and courage, skills that ensured his survival against overwhelming odds. His legacy continues to inspire adventurers, writers, and anyone who faces extreme challenges. Selkirk's life reminds us that even in complete isolation, the human spirit can endure, adapt, and triumph. Alexander Selkirk, the man who inspired Robinson Crusoe, lived a life defined by courage, ingenuity, and survival. Alone on a deserted island for over 4 years, he faced fear, hunger, and despair, yet emerged stronger, wiser, and forever remembered. His story is a testament to the power of human resilience. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and follow for more content like this, where we explore incredible survival stories, historical legends, and tales of human endurance. Don't forget to like, comment, and share, and join us as we uncover the extraordinary in ordinary lives.